At 5:30 in the morning, most people in my neighborhood were still asleep. I liked it that way. No noise, no small talk, no unnecessary decisions. Just pavement, cold air, and the familiar rhythm of my shoes hitting the river path before sunrise. 3 miles on weekdays, 6 on Saturdays. Same route, same pace, same playlist. After the divorce, routine had stopped being a preference and become something closer to scaffolding. It kept the day upright. My name's Daniel Mercer. I was 38, divorced, and living the kind of life people describe as disciplined when they want to avoid saying lonely. I worked in logistics for a medical supply company, kept my kitchen too clean, folded my running shirts with military precision, and had gotten very good at making solitude look like intention. Then Olivia moved in next door and ruined the quiet. Not loudly, which somehow made it worse. The first time I saw her, she was dragging a bike box up her front steps in the rain, wearing a baseball cap, black leggings, and the kind of expression people usually have right before they either laugh or swear. I offered to help. She looked at me, handed me one side without arguing, and said, "Good. You look useful." That was Olivia, 35 maybe. Dark blonde hair, usually in a ponytail, sharp eyes, quick mouth. The kind of woman who made every sentence sound like it had won the race and was waiting for you to catch up. Over the next few weeks, I learned things by accident. She worked in sports physical therapy, left early, came home tired, ran almost every morning. Had one of those easy social smiles she used on everybody except me, because with me she preferred amusement. Probably because she figured me out too fast. The first time she passed me on the river path, she glanced sideways and said, "You always run like you're trying to file a complaint against the sunrise." I said, "You always talk like this before 6?" She answered, "Only when the company's stiff." After that, it became a pattern. We'd cross paths 3 or 4 mornings a week. Sometimes she'd start ahead of me. Sometimes I'd be finishing my first mile when she came up beside me like she'd been dropped into the route by some smug, athletic universe. There was always a comment. "Big pace for a man carrying emotional paperwork. You heel strike like someone who mistrusts joy. You know this is exercise, right? Not penance?" I should have found her annoying. Instead, I started leaving 3 minutes earlier and picking up my pace at the second bridge. I told myself it was because she was competitive. That was technically true, it just wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that Olivia made my mornings feel less like punishment and more like something with edges and energy again. And I had not realized how dead calm my life had gotten until she started cutting through it like that. The line from the title happened on a Thursday. Gray sky, light wind, cold enough to make breathing feel sharp. I'd had a brutal week at work and slept badly the night before, which meant I was already annoyed before I even left my driveway. Olivia was stretching by the trail entrance when I got there, one foot propped on a bench, earbuds around her neck, looking way too awake for the hour. She looked me over once and said, "You seem grumpy." "I'm running." "That's not the same thing." I started down the path. She fell into step beside me for half a block, then pulled ahead with that maddeningly effortless stride of hers. About 20 yards up, she glanced over her shoulder, smirked, and called, "If you catch me, I'll let you—" She let the sentence hang just long enough to be dangerous. Then she finished it. "Buy me coffee." I barked out a laugh before I could stop myself. "Cheap trick?" I called back. "It worked," she said, and accelerated. Now, I want to be very clear. I am not a man who chases women because they turn running into flirting and dangle caffeine like bait. I am, however, a man with functioning legs and a wounded sense of pride. So, I picked up the pace. The next half mile was ugly, not dramatic movie ugly, real ugly. Tight lungs, cold air in the throat. The distinct awareness that Olivia had judged me correctly and was enjoying it. I caught her at the incline before the pedestrian bridge. Barely. She looked over, saw me beside her, and grinned like she'd planned the entire thing down to the yard. "That's better," she said. "You were getting complacent. You weaponized coffee? You responded to it." We slowed near the overlook, both breathing harder now, and for the first time there was no joke between us. Just steam in the air, morning light barely starting to lift over the river, and the strange intimacy of two people who have pushed themselves honest before breakfast. Then Olivia bent, hands on her knees, laughed once and said, Okay, serious question. I looked at her. That sounds suspicious. There's a 10-mile charity relay in 3 weeks. My partner just tore her calf. You run. You clearly enjoy suffering. Would you consider becoming useful on purpose? I frowned. You're asking me to race with you? I'm asking whether all this brooding cardio comes with actual performance. That should have been an easy no. I didn't do races anymore. Didn't do team anything, really. The marriage, the divorce, the years after, it had all pushed me toward controlled, solo things. No surprises, no dependencies, no chances to disappoint or be disappointed in public. Olivia straightened and looked at me, still smiling a little, but now there was something more deliberate in it. Not flirtation, a challenge. And before I could answer, she said, "Come on, Daniel, it's just one race. Unless your whole personality falls apart if somebody needs you to keep pace." That hit exactly where she meant it to. Because the worst part was, I couldn't tell whether she was teasing me or seeing me. I should have said no, not because I didn't want to spend more time with Olivia. That was exactly the problem. I wanted to say yes too fast, and men my age are supposed to know better than to trust enthusiasm that shows up before sunrise in compression socks. So I bought myself 10 seconds by stretching a hamstring I didn't need to stretch. Olivia watched me with open suspicion. That was either fake thinking or a genuine medical event. Both are possible. "Daniel," I looked at her. "What kind of relay?" "2-person. 10 miles total. 5 each." She took a breath. "It raises money for a rehab program for stroke patients who can't afford long-term recovery support." That changed things. Not because I'm especially noble, because my father had spent 8 months in physical therapy after a stroke when I was 27. He recovered enough to walk, drive, complain about cable news, all the things that make a life feel like itself again. But it had been expensive, exhausting, and way too easy to imagine how differently it might have gone if my parents had had less money and less insurance. Olivia saw my face shift and, for once, didn't joke. "My clinic helps with it every year," she said. "That's why I was doing it." I nodded slowly. "Your partner really tore her calf. Pickup soccer and false confidence. Deadly combination." Despite myself, I smiled. Then she said, "I'm not asking you to save me. I can still run it alone. I'd just rather not." There it was. The part that made me say yes. Not pressure, not guilt. Just honesty without drama. "When do we train?" I asked. Olivia's whole face lit up in a way that made me instantly suspicious of my own decision-making. "Oh, that was way too easy," she said. "I'm already regretting it." "You're going to regret it around hill repeats, not now." That was how I ended up meeting her on Saturday at 6:30 with a hydration vest I hadn't used in 2 years and a level of self-awareness I found deeply unhelpful. Olivia was already there when I reached the trail lot, bouncing lightly on the balls of her feet, wearing a navy long-sleeve running top and a look of predatory optimism. "You came prepared," she said, eyeing the vest. "I dislike humiliation. You're going to hate the next month." We started easy, warm-up pace, then intervals, then a miserable loop with 2 hills that seemed designed by people who hated knees. Olivia was worse than any coach I'd ever had, mostly because she disguised useful feedback as insults. "Your stride falls apart when you get annoyed." "My stride is fine." "No, your face is fine. Your stride is filing for divorce." Later. "You keep trying to win the mile instead of protect the pace." Those words sound fake. They sound like someone who's raced before. That part caught me. I glanced at her. "You race?" "I used to." She shrugged. "College, some after, then work got busy." The way she said it told me there was more there, but not enough to push. So I didn't. That was the interesting thing about training with Olivia. For all the banter, she respected silence. Not awkward silence. Just the kind people fall into when they're not trying to fill every gap with performance. By the 3rd run together, I knew her tells. When she was worried, she tightened her ponytail twice. When she was tired, she got funnier. When she was emotionally avoiding something, she turned everything into coaching. And by the 2nd week, she knew mine too. "You speed up every time I ask about your ex-wife," she said one Tuesday. I nearly tripped. "That's not true." "It's absolutely true." We were halfway through a tempo run along the river, both of us breathing hard enough that honesty came easier than polish. She left 3 years ago, I said. That's the official summary. Olivia slowed a fraction to match me. And the unofficial one? I looked out at the water. We were very good at logistics, bills, schedules, grocery lists, dentist appointments. Then one day I realized we hadn't laughed in months, and she said she'd noticed a year earlier. Olivia was quiet. I kept going because stopping there somehow felt worse. There wasn't some huge betrayal, just erosion. And by the time either of us said it out loud, there was almost nothing left to save except politeness. That sat between us for half a block. Then Olivia said softly, "That can hurt more than a dramatic ending." I looked at her. She didn't look back right away, just kept running, jaw set, eyes forward. That was when I knew she wasn't just humoring me. She understood something about quiet losses. A few minutes later, she said, lighter now, "Okay, since I shared space emotionally, you owe me one question." That seems manipulative. It's structured. I exhaled. "Fine. Why'd you stop racing?" She smiled without humor. "Because my fiancé thought I was more pleasant when I gave up anything that didn't revolve around him." That one hit hard. I stared at her. "Olivia." "Yeah." She looked over finally. "Turns out men who love your flexibility often mean your willingness to shrink." I had no clever answer for that. So I said the only honest thing I had. He was an idiot. That got a real laugh out of her. "Strong clinical assessment," she said. "Years of training." By race week, we had become something neither of us said out loud. A unit. Not romantic yet, not exactly, but close in a way that had stopped feeling accidental. We ran well together, talked well, knew when to push and when to ease off. And one Thursday morning, after a brutal final workout, Olivia handed me a coffee and said, "You know, this was supposed to be about me using you for cardio. And now," she looked at me over the cup, "now I'm a little concerned I like you best when you're trying not to smile." That should have been the moment I said something real. Instead, I laughed and said, "That seems like a design flaw." She smiled too, but not all the way. And for the first time since we started this whole thing, I had the distinct, dangerous feeling that if I missed the next opening, it wouldn't be because I hadn't seen it. It would be because I was scared of what happened if I reached for it. Race morning started cold and clear, the kind of early light that makes everything feel sharper than it probably is. The staging area was already crowded by the time I got there. Pop-up tents, volunteers in neon vests, runners bouncing on stiff calves, coffee that smelled better than it tasted. Olivia was near the registration table, pinning her bib to her shirt with the calm focus she used when she was nervous enough to need a task. She looked up when she saw me. "Good," she said. "You came." "That seems like a weird concern." "You'd be surprised." I stepped closer. "You thought I'd bail?" She shrugged one shoulder. "Not literally, emotionally maybe." That landed harder than it should have before 7 in the morning. I took my bib from her and said, "I'm here." Olivia nodded once, but her face stayed a little too careful. We were stretching near the barricades when a man in an expensive quarter zip jogged over with the kind of confidence I already disliked on sight. Tall, clean cut. Too familiar. Olivia saw him and muttered, "Oh, for the love of God." "Who's that?" "Derek, the ex-fiancé, of course." He smiled at her first, then at me. "Olivia, didn't know you were still doing this race." "Funny," she said. "I didn't know you were still auditioning as a cautionary tale." I liked her immediately for that, even more than I already had. Derek laughed like she'd said something flirtatious instead of accurate. Then he looked at me. "You her emergency replacement?" Olivia answered before I could. "He's my partner." Something in the way she said it made Derek's expression shift. Not much. Just enough. He smiled again, but thinner. "Well, good luck keeping up with her." I said, "I'm not worried." Derek glanced at my bib, then back at Olivia. "You still do that thing where you go out too fast when you're trying to prove something?" The silence after that was quick but ugly. Olivia's jaw tightened. I didn't know the whole story, but I knew enough. He was doing what weak men do when they can't get invited back in. reaching for an old bruise to prove they still know where it is. Before I could say anything, Olivia smiled coolly and said, "You should really stretch before you try to be condescending. Wouldn't want to pull something." He walked off after that. I looked at her. "You okay?" "Perfectly." That answer was bad enough that I touched her elbow lightly and said, "Olivia." She exhaled. I hate that he still knows which buttons existed before I took them back. That was honest. Good. I said, "Then don't race him. Race with me." She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her face softened. That was annoyingly helpful. I'm expanding my range. The horn for the first wave blew 15 minutes later. We'd agreed Olivia would run the first 5 and I'd close. She was stronger on speed. I was steadier late. Good strategy, mature strategy. The kind of thing I liked because it reduced chaos. Then she took off and I discovered strategy does not make watching someone you care about feel sane. I waited in the exchange zone with the other second leg runners, watching the path, checking times, telling myself to breathe like a normal person. When Olivia finally rounded the bend, she was moving well, but not smoothly. Her stride was a little off on the right. She hit my hand with the slap band and I caught her wrist for half a second. "You okay?" "Cramp," she said. "Go." So I went. The first 2 miles were clean, controlled. By mile 3, I was passing people who had gone out too fast. By mile 4, all I could think about was Olivia waiting at the finish with that cramp, and the fact that I wanted to get there for reasons that had very little to do with fundraising. I crossed hard, not heroically, just empty enough to know I'd done my job. When I stumbled through the chute, Olivia was standing just past the barrier with 2 water bottles and a look on her face I'm not sure I'll ever fully recover from. Pride. Relief. Something warmer than both. "You did it," she said. "We did it." That smile again. Not all the way hidden now. Then I looked down at her leg. How bad? Manageable. That sounds fake. It's a little fake. I took her arm and guided her toward a folding chair before she could argue. She sat, laughing softly at my expression. "You get bossy after races. I get accurate." She tipped her head back and looked up at me through the bright, cold sunlight. "You know what's really unfair?" "What?" "You're hottest when you're being responsible." I stared at her. Olivia pressed the water bottle to her forehead and groaned. "Well, there goes my dignity." No jokes came to me that time, no safe reroutes. Just one clear, dangerous thought. If I didn't say something now, I was going to spend the rest of the day hating myself for acting surprised by a truth I'd been running beside for weeks. I crouched in front of her before I could talk myself out of it. Olivia was still in the folding chair, metal around her neck, calf wrapped in an ice sleeve, cheeks flushed from the race and from whatever that sentence had just done to both of us. "You don't have to pretend you didn't say that," I told her. She looked at me over the rim of her paper cup. I wasn't planning to. That helped. A little. Because with anyone else, I might have softened this into something safer, a joke, a deflection, a promise to revisit it later. But later was exactly how people like us lost years. So I said it clean. "I like you," I told her. "A lot. Not in a running partner way, not in a my mornings got better way, even though they did." I held her eyes. "I mean, somewhere between the first hill workout and you insulting my pace face, you became the person I looked forward to most." Olivia went very still. Then she let out one small breath and said, "Okay, good." I blinked. "Good?" "Yes, good." Her mouth curved, because I was starting to think I'd have to fake a second cramp just to get you to speak like a man. I laughed. Then I leaned in and kissed her, not dramatically. Not because the race had turned us reckless, it felt earned. Like all those miles had stripped off one layer at a time until there was nothing left between us but the truth. When I pulled back, she was smiling in that soft, surprised way people do when something finally happens, exactly how they'd wanted it to. "Well," she said quietly, "that was worth the hill repeats." That's a terrible lesson. It's an excellent lesson. I drove her home after that. Not because she couldn't have driven herself, because I wanted one more hour with her before the day got ordinary again. At her house, she didn't get out right away. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. I looked at her. Tomorrow I pick you up for a recovery walk. That sounds suspiciously mature. I'm trying something new. And after that? After that, I said, I take you to dinner, a real one. No race bibs, no ex-fiancés, no strategic flirting disguised as cardio. That smile again. Good, she said, because I'm tired of only liking you in motion. The next morning, I picked her up at 9. No running shoes this time, just coffee, sunlight, and a slow walk along the same river path where she had first smirked over her shoulder and dared me to catch her. We talked for 2 hours. No jokes to dodge behind, no careful half-truths, just the actual story of us. How long we'd noticed, how long we'd delayed, and how ridiculous it was that a relay race had ended up doing the work neither of us had. That night, I kissed her again. Longer, without a finish line waiting nearby. 3 months later, she had fully recovered, and we ran the same charity relay again. This time by choice, not accident. She beat me to the exchange zone and said, "If you catch me, I'll let you buy me dinner." And I told her that joke had become legally binding. A year later, my house didn't feel like scaffolding anymore. Her spare shoes were by the door. Her coffee mug had a place in my cabinet. Saturday mornings meant long runs, pancakes, and arguments over playlists. Weeknights meant her on my couch reading patient notes while I answered emails. Both of us quiet in that deep, easy way that only happens when love has stopped trying to prove itself and started living. 2 years later, I proposed on the overlook above the river. Not because I'm wildly sentimental, because that was where she first stopped feeling like a challenge and started feeling like home. She cried before I finished the question, then got mad at herself for crying, then said yes 3 times like she didn't trust the first one to hold enough. We got married the following spring in a small ceremony near the water with only family, close friends, and Olivia's grandmother, who told everyone during dinner, I knew he was in trouble the first time she came home from a run smiling. And because life sometimes gives you more than you planned for after years of giving you less, 3 years after that we were back on the same path at sunrise. Older, sleepier, and taking turns pushing a jogging stroller while our daughter threw cracker pieces like a tiny, cheerful tyrant. Olivia looked over at me that morning and said, "You know, this is all your fault." How? You caught me. I smiled. You rigged the race. That too. Then she reached across the stroller handle, laced her fingers through mine for 1 warm second and kept running. That was the strange, beautiful part in the end. The title sounded like a tease. The story sounded like a challenge, but the truth was simpler. Then either won. I didn't just catch her on a morning run. I caught up to the life I was supposed to have. What would you have done if your neighbor challenged you on a morning run, turned you into her race partner, and then became the person you wanted every morning to start with? And have you ever had a so-called playful moment turn into something real enough to change your whole future? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.